Good morning and welcome. Thanks so much for joining us this morning for this webinar on the role of manufactured housing, helping to solve the region's housing crisis. My name is Sarah Reitzman. I'm the Executive Director of the Workforce Housing Coalition of the Greater Seacoast. We are thrilled to have partnered with the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund, I believe for the first time, and New Hampshire Housing for this morning's webinar. I'm going to start by introducing our first speaker, who is Tara Reardon, the ROC NH Director at the Community Loan Fund. So the Community Loan Fund is a nonprofit community development financial institution that collaborates with a wide range of donors and investors and with business, nonprofit, government partners to provide the financing and support that people with low and moderate incomes need to have affordable homes, quality jobs in childcare, and to become financially independent. ROC NH, its oldest and largest program, promotes the affordability of manufactured home ownership. Tara, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sarah, and good morning. I'm happy to have this opportunity to talk about tackling the affordable housing crisis in the Seacoast and with the option of manufactured housing. Some people still call them mobile homes, but they're not mobile. They're not tiny houses and they're not modular. But 7% of homeowners in New Hampshire and nationwide choose manufactured housing as their housing choice. The other thing I want to point out is when we talk today about manufactured housing, usually when we're talking about affordable housing, we're talking about rental housing, but we're talking about home ownership when we're talking about manufactured housing. New Hampshire law defines what's manufactured housing, what's modular, and what's a tiny home. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about that other than to say manufactured housing is a home built in a factory on a steel chassis or frame, transported to a site and permanently affixed to the ground. The amount of waste that comes from the construction of that home in a factory fits in a regular sized garbage can. These homes are built to a HUD code, which is a federal building code, have been since 1976. They have 2x6 construction and they don't have a shelf life. If cared for properly, just like any stick-built home, it's a forever home. The minimum size by statute definition is 80 by 40, so 320 square feet. The smallest model that we work with and know of with a HUD code sticker on it is a 500 square foot home. And we've actually put 10 of those into a community in Danville, New Hampshire. It is real estate in the state of New Hampshire from the time it's affixed to the ground, and it's eligible for regular single family financing, even Fannie Mae financing in communities that have been approved. Importantly, the cost of manufactured housing is 1/5 the cost of site-built homes. But mostly they're homes in great little neighborhoods. We at ROC NH, the program of the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund, work with 134 resident-owned communities. That's what we call ROCs, including 28 ROCs here in the Seacoast. That represents 2,000 households. New Hampshire's home to about 450 manufactured housing communities, but the Community Loan Fund focuses only on ROCs. Why? They're affordable homes, it's home ownership, and when owning and controlling the land under your home, it's a more stable and secure form of housing. In an investor-owned community, you could be given 18 months notice to move your home or abandon it. ROCs are cooperatively owned and run by the residents that live there. They're not-for-profit consumer cooperatives, and they raise the lot rent, that's the fee paid to the cooperative for your lot, only when their costs increase and the members vote on it. Therefore, they stay affordable. They're easy one-floor living with a yard and your car parked outside your door. Small, narrow private streets that make bike riding and walking safe. Neighbors who notice if you haven't retrieved your newspaper, shoveled your walk, or even raised your blinds in the morning. It's pretty simple to attach a wheelchair ramp if the need arises. This is a great place and neighborhood to raise a family or age in place. Who lives in resident-owned communities? A retired police chief, emergency room nurse, retail and grocery store workers, childcare providers, and teachers. In other words, essential working population keeping our economy going. How affordable is it? You'll notice that I'm talking about home ownership, not rental, and the typical cost of home ownership in New Hampshire is including the lot rent, the principal and interest, and the tax is less than the comparable 2-bedroom apartment rental in the same area. Of 37,000 homes in the state of New Hampshire, that of the 37,000 homes in the state of New Hampshire that are valued at less than 100,000, nearly all of those are manufactured housing. Another important piece of this is the availability of the housing. It's development that can happen in manufactured housing communities without the need for zoning and planning approvals, typical barriers to building a new home. Empty lots and communities can be filled without that process. And there are over 300 empty lots in the state of New Hampshire, but in the Seacoast alone, there's 35 empty lots. And we can help with the financing of homes on those lots. No barriers for approvals or permits. In fact, over the last 10 years in the Seacoast area alone, we've provided mortgage financing to 29 people through our Welcome Home Loan Program with an average mortgage of less than $75,000. Now that's affordable.
Awesome. Tara, thank you so much. So Tara did a great job explaining what manufactured housing is, but we'd like to talk about who manufactured housing is too. So before I turn the presentation over to our next speaker, I want to ask our attendees this time to write in the chat, what comes to mind when you picture who lives in manufactured housing? And so while those answers are coming in, so think about who lives in manufactured housing. So while you're doing that, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Ignatius McClellan, who is the Managing Director, the Home Ownership Division at New Hampshire Housing. Ignatius believes successful home ownership matters to people and communities. Before joining the team at New Hampshire Housing, Ignatius was Vice President of Public Affairs at the Northern New England Housing Investment Fund, Director of Fannie Mae's Northern New England Community Business Center, and Program Officer at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Before working full-time on housing, Ignatius practiced law for over 13 years. Ignatius attended Boston College and the University of Maine School of Law. His true passion is bringing groups to El Salvador to work with the community on various development projects, including building homes with families. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Ignatius now.
All right, good morning. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Tara, for setting this up. So I'm going to talk about who the borrowers are from the perspective of credit quality, because I think there are some assumptions that because you live in manufactured homes, that you don't have good credit, and that turns out not to be the case. But let me first do my New Hampshire Housing commercial. So New Hampshire Housing is a self-funded public entity created by the state to help bring affordable housing to New Hampshire. The good news is we've got some wonderful programs. So if you're looking to buy a home or know someone who is, we've got cash assistance, we've got purchase rehab, and as you can see behind me, we got mortgage credit certificates in terms of saving money on your federal taxes. And one of the things we'll talk about, we've got boutique loans with manufactured housing and Fannie Mae. Next slide, please. As Tara pointed out, one of the great things about living in New Hampshire when it comes to manufactured housing is manufactured housing, when connected to required utilities, is real estate. And why does that matter? It means you can mortgage it the same way that you can a stick-built home. So when you think about who lives in manufactured homes, I mean, the good news is these are people who can access the normal mortgage financial system. Next slide, please. And so there's a myriad of programs out there to serve these borrowers, but they're specific to the program. So whether it's your local bank, Fannie Mae, FHA, Rural Development, Veterans Affairs, and the Community Loan Fund, they'll all have specific requirements. I mean, one of the things that I would note, we have a Fannie Mae program for manufactured homes in resident-owned communities, and the rate on the 19th was 3%. And then my last bullet, which is who lives in manufactured housing, our neighbors, people we know, people we work with. And for me, liquidity, meaning you can get a 3% rate, equals dignity to these people who are wonderful neighbors. Next, please. So one of the things that I did was, let's take a look at the New Hampshire housing borrower and compare manufactured housing to stick-built, and you'll see the loan size is smaller, the monthly payment is smaller, but look at the credit score is actually higher for people who live in manufactured housing. So if you were answering the question, who lives in manufactured homes, and you were thinking, well, people who don't have good credit, you would be incorrect. Look at the credit score, 707, the debt to income, 40%, and the delinquency actually better than it is on stick-built. And then just the other thing about, okay, where is the MH? 63% of manufactured home on its own land, 37% are in parks. Next slide, please. So let's just talk about two issues. One is affordability, and the other one is inventory, the lack of inventory. So what's going on in the general market? Well, according to the New Hampshire Realtors Association, in its December 2020 data, the median sales price was $360,000. Just think of that, $360,000. And that sales price was up just about 17% from the prior year. But what's the other problem? The other problem is the inventory is at an all-time low. The month's supply, there is less than a month's supply left, meaning if no new homes came on the market, all of the homes in New Hampshire would be sold in less than a month, meaning we've got a real big problem. Number of homes on the market has actually decreased 60% compared to last year. Next slides, please. So what's on the good news? The good news is mortgage rates are at an all-time low, 2.8% on a 30-year fixed. Compare that to just the year prior, and it was about 4.5% and the like. So interest rates have come down to bring some level of affordability. Next, please. And so what is the income that you need to afford this median priced home of $360,000? You need to make about $110,000, and you're going to pay about $1,400 in principal and interest. Next slide, please. All right, well, let's look at manufactured housing and talk about how it can help affordability and the inventory. The average price for a manufactured home in New Hampshire is $90,000. So compare that to the 360. And I think I told you our loan data put it at about 117,000. What do you need to afford that? You need about 45,000, and your monthly payment's going to be about 350. Then you've got to add on the park rent and or the taxes if you own the land. So what's the inventory opportunity? Well, New Hampshire Housing did a year-long study to see what can we do to get starter homes built. Very difficult to do in this market for so many reasons. What's been one of the real success stories is the Community Loan Fund citing new manufactured homes in rocks. And I think there's also an opportunity to do it on its own land. There are real benefits to that approach, both from an affordability perspective and the speed with which you can get it done. And my final slide, please. Is that my final? Oh, that is my final slide. Oh, and I would just end by pointing out that Tara noted that the average two-bedroom rent was $1,350. So I would say manufactured housing, when you think about who lives there, they're people who work in the community. They're people who, while their income may be lower, their credit is excellent. And they're people who could afford to live in your community if we could just find a way to get more MH located. Thank you.
Thank you, Ignatius. So we're actually going to turn the presentation back over to Tara once more to give you a real local example, the Woodbury Cooperative in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. But before we do that, I just wanted to remind participants there's going to be opportunity for Q&A at the end after we talk about Woodbury. So do drop those questions in the Q&A box. I'm trying to catch all the ones that are in the chat box, and I think I've done a good job so far, but if you drop those in the Q&A, we definitely won't miss them. Tara, it's all yours.
Thanks, Sarah. The Woodbury residents, pictured here after their closing, bought their community back in 2016 And the two on each end are still on the board there. They chose to buy their community instead of losing their homes. The investor interested in buying the community would have leveled it and built something else. He showed them the plans. Every household in Woodbury earns 80% or less of the area median income, and the community's lot rents, again, the fee paid for the use of the land, are below market rate for Portsmouth. The community's on a public bus route. Residents are essential workers. They work at Market Basket, drive a taxi, deliver newspapers. Some are disabled. No one can afford an increase in monthly lot rent. When the residents stepped up and bought it, they inherited a park that the prior owner didn't invest in. From day one, they envisioned what they wanted their community to be. There's abandoned homes and homes that need to be removed. Narrow roads make it impossible for emergency vehicles to enter the property. Unfortunately, last year, one of the homes caught fire and the fire trucks couldn't get into the narrow entrance of the main access road. The fire trucks had to pull onto an adjacent lot, remove a fence to access the burning home. Let's spend a couple of minutes hearing from Leslie and Kathy, the two that you just saw in that first slide, who are residents of Woodbury Cooperative, in a short video.
It is very financially costly here in Portsmouth. There's not a lot of affordable housing for, the blue collar worker. So when you say, hey, I live at the old Ward's trailer park, it's now Woodbury Co-op, they kind of go, oh, you live there? Well, yeah, I live there. That's my home. I've grown up on Woodbury Ave. I've been here my whole life. A lot of people have been here in the park now for decades. Now we own our own homes. So, and we have the ability to stay.
So the residents of Woodbury Cooperative took ownership back in March of 2016. I provide technical assistance, which is a combination of consulting and coaching to help the community achieve their goals. And the goal for Woodbury right now is infrastructure projects.
The storage and piping is over 50 years old. So to get all that replaced would really help things.
Would look better having things a little bit more uniform than right now it's all modge podged. And by removing the structures that are empty, we could have an access road that's wide enough for emergency vehicles to actually turn to be able to get in and out safely.
The way we're going to do that is removing some existing buildings that are abandoned, that are making the entrance too narrow, as well as reordering a few manufactured homes. We're replacing the water and sewer lines that are currently at the end of the use of life, as well as adding 4 new homes to the community.
Demolishing and making some new space for the new homes, that would help with new tenants.
I'm sure we could fill those immediately if they were here, because there are a lot of people in need.
Folks here are on fixed incomes. Some have part-time jobs, some work full-time at a local restaurant or grocery store. I currently pay $545 a month in monthly rent, which for the area is affordable.
We're going to get people that can afford to move into them, and still pay a reasonable rent. Because they'll probably have a mortgage on top of the rent.
By adding the 4 additional homes, it helps maintain affordability, and that keeps the rent stable. And that's why we need help. In order to provide a financing package that keeps the rent at $545, it's going to take some donations and folks willing to pitch in.
I think if we're able to get the changes that we're shooting for, I think that would be a good start for us. And then it would give 4 different families opportunities that they probably didn't have before here in Portsmouth.
I just want to share again what the residents' plans are, what they want their community to be. To secure their neighborhood for long-term success, the following needs to happen. They need to remove those abandoned and dilapidated commercial buildings, which incidentally they're paying taxes on right now. Improve the water and sewer infrastructure, reorient 2 homes for fire safety in that community, widen that shared driveway to accommodate fire trucks, and add 4 new affordable homes. That's the improvements as the plan shows. But at each meeting, Leslie and Kathy, the other board members and members that attend, the conversation always ends up with, I would like a little green space and a little spot for a garden too. They really have their vision that's been there since the beginning. The total cost of this effort is $1.3 million. And Woodbury falls into a gap. We are unable to access community development block grants. Portsmouth is an entitlement city, and we generally can access USDA rural development grants, but this is in an urban environment. Again, that's not a possibility. So despite the hard work and efforts of the residents over the last 4 years, the only way to get this work done is to enlist the broader community. The addition of 4 new affordable housing units makes this project even more compelling. Of the 1.3 million, as you see on the screen here, 8,000 of it falls into our traditional lending program, but the other 500,000 needs to be raised in donations and grants. That's because the residents can't afford a lot rent. You've heard it from them. Not even $20 a month. So the 500,000 we raise will be loaned to Woodbury at 0% interest. And when they pay it back, that loan will go out to another borrower at 0% interest. So far, we've raised about 150,000, so we have that remaining 350,000 to go. And that's where we're turning to the community for support. If you'd like to support this neighborhood revitalization effort and add 4 units to affordable housing in Portsmouth, you can do so online. You saw it up on the screen a minute ago at our website, communityloanfund.org/Woodbury. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you. All right, so we have plenty of time for Q&A. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, which is always exciting, even with any technical issues. So we'd love to answer as many questions as we can from you. Make sure to drop those in the Q&A box so that we don't miss them if they get lost in the chat. We do have a few already, so let's start tackling those. Tara, I'm going to start with you, and there's a really awesome question, and I know that you have a great example. Someone asked, are there opportunities for nonprofits to purchase and use these homes as long-term supportive housing? And sort of related to that, can they be rental homes?
So we do have a scenario in a rock in New Hampshire. You have to think of all of these neighborhoods as their own little democratic enclave where they make the decisions and they change their bylaws. So we do have one community who changed their bylaws.
Uh-oh. Is Tara frozen for other folks or just me? Okay.
Yeah, she's frozen.
Worked out really wonderfully. We've partnered with a lot of other groups, Harbor Home, Easter Seals, things like that. And in fact, they've actually had the homeowner buy the home, but still provide the supportive services. So it depends on the vote of the individual community themselves, whether they want to change their bylaws. But we do have a couple of examples that are working out really well.
Awesome. There was a question about manufactured housing in Florida and how we can support that, but it looks like Ignatius covered that. There are, I believe from a quick Google search, a rock in Florida too. So you have that as a resource, is that right?
I would add one thing to that most of the resident-owned communities in Florida are not limited equity cooperatives, which is what we have here in New Hampshire. The folks that live in our cooperatives generally don't have $10,000 to buy into those communities, which is how that model works. Our membership fees in the communities we work with are the one-time joining fee that you get back when you leave is usually under $500.
There is one question out there that might be kind of a tricky one. Ignatius, I don't know if you want to take a stab at this, but the question is about the technology. How can the technology be incorporated into multi-story or multi-family buildings? Is there's an opportunity to use manufactured housing and create bigger than?
Yep. So here's where you get into definitions. And so definition is it's for a manufactured home is basically that stand-alone unit that still has the chassis that is used for transport. I think the question goes to either modular or panelized. And if the person wants to look me up at New Hampshire Housing on our low-income housing rental production side, there are examples of modular housing and panelized construction. I believe the new apartment building going up in Bedford near 393 was a panelized deal. So what I would do is, yes, there are very good examples in New Hampshire of modular and panelized on the multifamily side. Shoot me an email and I'll connect that person to our multifamily folks. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question specific to Woodbury Cooperative, so I'm going to throw this to Tara. How much has the City of Portsmouth done in support for this project? What, if any, were the barriers to their support? There was another question that was asking for some clarification on the use of the CDBG funds, so maybe that kind of goes hand in hand there.
The City of Portsmouth has been wonderful from the very beginning. Their new building inspector back in 2016, when they were buying the community, required the community to do a fire study. Not in any other city or town has that ever been required, but he recognized the issues that were there. I think that was a wise thing to do. They did make some recommendations that are unaffordable for these folks. It would be great to tie them all together with one fire system so everybody's alarm would go off at the same time. Those are really unaffordable kinds of things. But we've worked our way through the technical advisory committee, and we're actually going to planning board in February with our final site plan. We're pretty excited about. But I will say, working with the City of Portsmouth, they've been very open to being educated about this isn't the typical housing that they're seeing in the City of Portsmouth. And so far, so good working with them. About CDBG, there's Ignatius can correct me if I'm wrong, 5 communities in New Hampshire who get a lump sum of money under the Community Development Block Program, I think directly from HUD. All of the other cities, if we were working in Concord, we would ask the city to put an application for $500,000. Portsmouth, understandably, when they plan for their money's planned several years out with traditionally big projects that becomes a part of funding. So it just wasn't an option for these folks in the City of Portsmouth, but we tried.
Fantastic. There's also some questions, some clarification. What is meant by supportive services for manufactured housing? Probably rocks.
So it's not part of the ROC program itself, but when we work with Easter seals, we will work in, especially to bring somebody into home ownership, we work as much with their case manager as with the individual who's going to be in that home. So although it's not part of services that we supply, we are very open to solving the housing problems of all of those agencies, Easter Seals, Harbor Homes, Family Promise, and we've had conversations with all of them about partnering with them to get and they provide the supportive piece, we provide the housing piece.
And then just to follow up, if I could, Sarah, so if anybody's listening and either you are thinking about buying a home or you know someone who is, there's a very good network of housing counselors in the state of New Hampshire, including the Housing Partnership in Portsmouth. A great way for folks to sit down and to take a look at their budget, if needed, do credit repair and start the planning process about how do you buy a home. And then at the same time, learn about what are the programs out there that can help. For example, we're working with the Loan Fund on these infill manufactured home, and eligible borrowers could get a $10,000 down payment assistance loan that basically sits there as a silent second to bring that affordability. So if you have staff members, employees, family who are thinking about manufactured housing as an option, start with your housing counselor at the Housing Partnership would be my recommendation.
Great. So we have somebody who's wondering if manufactured housing in resident-owned communities approved or eligible for standard real estate financing, does that mean that standalone homes on individual lots are not eligible for this type of financing?
No, that's a good question. I mean, the norm always has been from a mortgage finance system that if you have a home on your own land, it's relatively easy to get that financed, assuming the home and the foundation meets the specific criteria for the program. So that's the norm. I think the exception is that Fannie Mae was willing to work with us in New Hampshire to put in place a program where you can have a home within a resident-owned community and have a mortgage on that home that frankly then gets sold into the conventional market, which is how we're able to offer the rates. And it's a wonderful partnership between the loan fund, the resident-owned communities, and Fannie Mae and New Hampshire Housing to access. But yeah, there certainly is manufactured housing financing available from anything from your community bank to other opportunities if you're on your own land.
Great, great. Tara, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, we do work closely with New Hampshire Housing, and I'm glad Ignatius supplied all of that information.
Great. There was a quick question in the chat. Is it possible to get all these links sent to us on the loan and finance programs? And the answer was absolutely. We'll have the follow-up information, or rather our contact information in the last slide, so you'll get to see that. And it'll also go out. We're going to send a follow-up email later today, and you'll get a follow-up email from the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund too. So feel free to send all those questions to us, and we'll send whatever resources we can that would be helpful. So what other questions do we have out here?
In the chat, Sarah, question, do most of the financing of manufactured homes come from Fannie Mae? I think the answer is no. I think when you think about financing manufactured housing, just like any type of housing, it's a broad spectrum of organizations from, as I mentioned, your community banks, either in a portfolio product, which means the bank keeps that loan, or using FHA, Fannie Mae, Rural Development, Veterans Assistance. The loan fund has a wonderful loan program for folks, but I'm not sure if that's just in resident-owned community. I think that's their focus. So I would say if you are interested in financing a manufactured home, talk to your housing counselor, talk to your local bank, talk to the loan fund, give me a call. But it's a broad spectrum of people. And again, we go back to why does New Hampshire have all these options? Because manufactured housing is treated as real estate. It's really important.
I'd love to follow up on what Ignatius said. The Community Loan Fund does have a welcome home loan program that we are more than happy if anybody wants to contact us to get that information out. And that is in resident-owned communities or a home on its own land. We'll cover either one of those.
Great. We got a great question from someone in the audience. So what are the challenges for park tenants to organize and successfully purchase their park? So this person was reading recently about a park in New Hampshire that was sold to an investor, and they don't know what efforts the residents made to secure it as their own rock, but it would be good to know generally, what are the challenges for park tenants to organize?
COVID is number one. We have some great laws here in the state of New Hampshire, and it's the reason why there's 134 resident-owned communities here. One is that when there's a purchase and sale on a park, when an investor owner is going to sell, the residents have to get notice of it from that park owner, and the park owner also has to give New Hampshire Housing Finance notice, which is ideal. That hasn't been in the law since the very beginning, but when we get notice, we reach out immediately for an informational session. So information is probably the key barrier for most people. The other barrier is it's difficult in community organizing to be the community organizer when your potential new landlord is watching. And we need to overcome that with residents, that they do have the power. This is their right under New Hampshire law to organize. And generally in information meetings that we have now, and this is a wonderful thing in the state of New Hampshire, rarely is there not somebody at that meeting who hasn't already lived in a rock. They have a relative that lives in a rock, or they work with somebody who lives in a rock. So it's a much better known concept now, but it's a lot of engineering due diligence and searching for a lender, searching for a property manager. But most groups that we work with, especially recently, now that it's a comfortable model for them, they know somebody who's done it, vote to do that. There are some instances when the economics just don't work. And there are instances where the investor owner has deferred maintenance for so long that the infrastructure needs are really, really high, and that's a barrier. But I love the resiliency of the people that we work with. That Leslie and Kathy at Woodbury have been at this since the very first day. They've been hardworking all their lives, and this is their housing. They're going to make this work for them.
And if I could add something about the economics, I mean, there has been a real change in the market for two types of property in New Hampshire: manufactured housing parks and self-storage. And the reason is there's a lot of money in the country looking for income producing properties. And they think of manufactured housing parks as an asset class, as compared to we think about them as communities where people live. And so what Tara was saying, there are large national organizations coming to New Hampshire, calling up the manufactured housing parks and offering significant amount of money because they're thinking about the cash flow aspect, even if there's deferred maintenance. I think our orientation, along with the loan fund, is these are communities that we should all work together to save, so that we save them for the community. And so we give residents, like I think it was Leslie and Kathy, the opportunity to own their home and to own their park. So part of me says we need to be rebels and kind of fight that economic force. And I think that's where New Hampshire law, what the loan fund is doing, what all the banks that support the loan fund's efforts are doing. I think it's really a good model, and we should be very proud about what's happening in New Hampshire.
Right. And I know a lot of the resident-owned communities are existing manufactured housing parks that are then turned into that rock. So someone asked, and it's a great question, have you considered or partnered in building new communities that are organized as a rock from the start?
We've worked with developers over the year who have an idea that they want to develop a park, and this is what we do is manufactured housing parks. We are more than happy to partner with developers who choose to do that if they agree to sell it to the residents when they're done developing it. So we're more than happy to be a resource for groups like that. The Community Loan Fund has developed one community in its 37 years. It was some development rights that were sold along with a community that became a rock that was just too good to be true. But we mostly stay in our lane and let professionals do what they do and act as a resource to them.
Yeah, and I would just add, Sarah, as you know, and others on this call know, I mean, in some ways it's shameful, the local resistance to new housing. And so in my prior job, I helped an organization get like 20 units of rental housing built, and the community opposition about those people living in the apartments, and those people are our neighbors. So the same dynamic would exist if you're doing a manufactured housing park that was new, as happens when you try to do rental housing, community opposition. And in a state where home ownership rates are 72 to 74%, somewhere around there, it's sad that you would think that would have people say, I've got a home, let me help others. But often it leads to, I've got a home, I want to protect my vision, and I'm going to oppose projects and the like. So the same issue that's impacting inventory generally in this state, which is a lot of community opposition, and in some ways lack of community support, to put it the positive way, would probably apply if you tried to build a new MH park, sadly.
Yeah. And following up on that, I mean, thinking of Woodbury and other times where you're turning an existing park into manufactured housing, given that there's no need to go the route of the planning and zoning board, is there still that piece of it, that community opposition that you have to deal with?
With existing parks, we're not seeing that, and part of going back to when we were talking about who lives in existing manufactured housing parks, in one of our parks, the town clerk lives there. So I think the more education we do, the more widespread this model becomes. We're going to get rid of that stigma. And we talk about stigma a lot and work on it. And that's why we love these opportunities to tell people with manufactured housing may have better credit scores than, you know, a similar population. That's what I think is going to take to do it. So I think with 100, we have over 8,200 households in those 134 rocks. That's a pretty good size in the state of New Hampshire. We've really spread people out from, you know, top to bottom, side to side. So I think we're getting there with existing communities, unless there's issues with that community that the town has unsuccessfully dealt with an investor on, which happens mostly around infrastructure, things like that, or lack of rule enforcement. Generally, the existing communities have great reputations, and the towns know exactly who lives there.
Yeah, that's great.
And
That's great.
if I could, Sarah, one really wonderful story about who lives in these homes, but I always get tearful when I tell it, which is the Loan Fund working with Harbor Homes did some homes for veterans in the state of New Hampshire. And the gentleman who got the home said, I served in Vietnam. This country never thanked me for the service. This is the first time anybody's ever really welcomed me to my country. And I think when you think about who lives in these homes, it's the same answer who lives in all of these homes, which is our neighbors, people who serve us, used to serve us coffee, who clean rooms, who teach, who nurse, and the like. And I just think the stigma, I appreciate with Tara, we need to get rid of the stigma about people who live in any type of lower moderate income housing as somehow being enemies rather than our neighbors. And I thank the Loan Fund for inviting me to to hear that gentleman speak, because it was really one of the great moments of all of 2020.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And it seems from the answers that folks put into the chat this morning about who lives in manufactured housing, that we have a lot of folks here who really get that. And certainly, I think most people here understand how tough that stigma breaking is, that myth busting that we all do in our work. And so at the end of the call, we'll give you all a call to action, because we'll certainly need your help doing exactly that. Tara, there is a question here. Somebody is wondering about other opportunities, manufactured housing in Portsmouth, and specifically if there's any manufactured housing in downtown.
There isn't manufactured housing in downtown that I know of, although Woodbury is pretty close to downtown. It's a great location. There is one other large community right on Lafayette Road called Hillcrest that declined to be a resident-owned community back in 2013 when we worked with them. But there is no reason that manufactured housing can't be used as infill on city lots. We talked about the affordability compared to stick-built prices, especially now with lumber prices skyrocketing. And it is a really smart and sensible solution, and maybe a quicker solution. I love the story that there's only a garbage can of waste after building a manufactured home in a factory, because you know what a job site looks like with contractors just throwing things out the window. So siting a home that's built in a factory, weather-wise, it's never open. There's so many pluses to manufactured housing, and I would love to see it used more on infill lots in urban areas or rural areas, whichever.
Yeah.
Yep. So quick comment, there was a question about what is an infill lot. So within a park, an infill lot, think of it simply as either a vacant lot or a lot that has such a dilapidated home, it's best to pull it out and put a new one. Within an urban setting, same deal, you've got an empty lot, bring it in. The great thing about manufactured housing, given what's happened in the trade since the last recession, the quality and the appeal of manufactured homes is phenomenal. Both Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have developed these very nice looking manufactured homes that you would hardly know were manufactured housing. So if your initial response was, ooh, manufactured homes, if you look at what they're making today, they're really beautiful homes. And I think, as Tara indicated, as long as you keep them up, they keep up just like stick-built homes, as long as you do the maintenance.
That's great. Yeah, and if you want to see examples of beautiful manufactured housing, there is a photographer who's here today in this webinar who takes photos of manufactured housing, and maybe if she's okay with it, I will share her project and the beautiful things that she photographs in the communities, because she has photographed some in Maine, and there's one available or a couple available on our website. So certainly there are lots of really beautiful examples. Yeah, Kathleen said, of course. So I'll send that out to all of you so you can check out her project. It's really very cool. I'll put that in the follow-up email that'll go out later today. Someone asked, are these developments permitted in all New Hampshire communities, or are they prohibited in some?
That would require me to know 234 zoning and planning ordinances, and I don't. I know, obviously, all of the ones that we work with. It's a pretty wide swath of communities that do have manufactured housing that was, like this one in Portsmouth, just developed in somebody's backyard. Nobody ever went to zoning and said, I want to build a manufactured housing park here. I would hope that there would be a prohibition in planning and zoning laws that would prevent that from happening, but Ignatius might know better than I.
Yeah, I'm not aware of a specific prohibition, and I apologize that I don't know the answer to this question, but the good news in New Hampshire, because of the history with manufactured housing and a great job our legislature has done, my sense would be that it's generally permitted in terms of putting it on its own land. The park issue could be another issue, and I'm glad to take a look into that, Sarah, if you'd like. So
yeah, absolutely. And he, the person who asked the question, called out a specific community, and I don't want to name names, but maybe I'll connect him with the town planner who's in this call somewhere. So let's see, what other questions do we have? So Ignatius, someone's wondering how boutique financing supports people who are already living in an existing rock. Can it be used to refinance or replace an older home?
yeah, so this is the idea that we're actually now more working on, both on our own and with the loan fund and talking to some others, which is, how do you bring this idea of replacing older homes to the market? Because the challenge is people are really willing to do the end financing when the house is there, set up on the lot, but you have to put money down to order the home. You have to get site work done. You have to pay for the home to be delivered, and that's just a little bit more complicated from a financial perspective. It is an issue that we are actually looking at this moment, because I know the end financing has, I think, in many ways got a lot of very good solutions. And I don't know if Tara has any thoughts on doing an infill for someone, and how do you finance the purchase of the home and the site work while they're still paying other costs, which is a challenge.
The Welcome Home Loan Program at the Community Loan Fund does allow you to do financing to site a new home. And I will also say, we recognized the need last year for a navigator. That is, most home buyers are not equipped to be the general contractor to do that. We have lots of great contractors that we do work with, but the navigator is key to that role, to just explaining to somebody how that happens. And I think that really sets the Welcome Home loans apart. And the Welcome Home loans do refis of the existing homes too. So that's always an option with us.
That's great. That's great. And we did get clarification in the chat box. So by state law, manufactured housing cannot be prohibited. Towns have the option of allowing it either on individual lots or in subdivisions, or both, and they can limit locations, but it can't be outright prohibited. So thank you to the person who shared that.
That's why I'm no longer an attorney. So
and it is 9:26. We're almost out of time, so I did promise that we would throw out. I always love to leave attendees with a call to action. You're feeling all fired up. You learned a lot of things. So Ignatius, I'm going to start with you. What can the attendees who are here and are fired up and ready to do something do if they'd like to support manufactured housing on the Seacoast?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, if you're an employer on this call, don't be afraid to invite New Hampshire Housing to come talk to your staff about opportunities for home ownerships and some of the down payment options we have. And again, we would do that in conjunction with Renee at the Housing Partnership. And I do think that when you think about housing, include affordable housing and include manufactured housing as part of the discussion. I think if we're going to address the need for housing across income spectrums and across employment spectrums, we need to open up all of the possibilities to new production. And I would just ask people, hey, keep manufactured housing in there. Thanks.
Yeah. Tara, what about you? What can attendees do to support manufactured housing and resident-owned communities in their community? And specifically, how can they support the Woodbury Cooperative, which needs help now?
Yeah, Woodbury Cooperative does need help now, and that you can get more information about it and support it on our website, which I'm not sure is up right now, but communityloanfund.org/Woodbury. The other thing, in addition to Woodbury, there's little Woodburys all over the state that are not actually in the condition of Woodbury, but manufactured housing communities where your neighbors and your coworkers live. And we love to tell this story because there is new information that people have aha moments about all the time. So either individually, if you have questions, or if you're a group, if you have a civic group, a religious group that just wants to hear more about manufactured housing, we love to come out and tell that story.
That's great. Thank you. So thank you to everyone for joining us this morning. So here's our contact information. Please do feel free to reach out anytime to any of us with your comments and your questions. We're happy to send you lots of resources. You'll get a follow-up email later today with this information and a link to this webinar so that you can share it with a friend. You'll also get a follow-up email from the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund with some other information. A huge thank you to Tara and Ignatius for sharing your time and your expertise with us this morning. And thank you again for all of us for joining us, and to all of our friends at the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund and New Hampshire Housing for making this event possible this morning. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thanks,
Sarah
Sarah.
and Steve, Michelle.